Magic for the Horn headlines. So let's get right to this Tom Haberstroh article. It is fascinating. So he essentially starts with Bronny James. And there's a lot of hot takes about LeBron James and Bronny James. Some people believe that LeBron James is forcing his son Bronny James onto this into this situation where he wants Bronny James to be drafted and is going to use his influence to do so. And by the way, nothing wrong with that. A lot of people use their influence to put their kids on in a better situation on a bigger platform. Totally get that, but some people believing that this is a form of basically privilege. That Bronny James, who averaged less than 5 points per game at USC and less than a little over 2 assists per game, that he's not deserving of being drafted into the NBA. And that he will be drafted or could be drafted because LeBron James and LeBron James's circle are using their influence, and they're probably more influential than any circle in the NBA to get Bronny James drafted. So Tom Haberstroh is basically this is devil's advocate kind of stuff because he's looking at the data, and he's essentially saying that if you're going to draft Bronny James in the second round, and let's take the LeBron James element out of it. Like let's just assume you're not gonna get LeBron James with Bronny James. You're just gonna get Bronny James.
Yeah.
Right. So most people are like, oh yeah, of course, if you're gonna get the added bonus of getting LeBron James who wants to play with his son, then great. Let's just say you're getting Bronny James. Is it worth drafting him in the second round if you're just getting Bronny?
I mean,
and his take is, let me get the information that we'll get into it. His take is that it might be worth it. And here's why. Because he is saying that basically these the nepo ballers,
yeah,
all right, the bloodlines essentially in the NBA. When you've looked at players who've had fathers who've played in the NBA, no matter how good they've been or not, most of the time, or I can say more often times than not, they actually are productive players in the NBA. And here's his take. He said he went back and looked at the modern 2-round draft since 1989. Said about 2,000 players have been selected to enter the NBA in that time span. And he said there have been 68 draftees whose father played in the NBA on average. He said on average, legacy picks have been done exceptionally well compared to their peers. And he looked at Basketball References win shares. So he's looking at different advanced metrics. And he claims that the legacy draftees, based on where they were drafted, they outperformed their expected value at their draft slot by 30%. Now, it depends on where you draft them, but they outperformed their draft slot by 30%. He said the legacy draftees, based on where they were drafted, were on average expected to generate 1.65 annual win shares in their careers, the equivalent caliber of the 16th pick. He said instead, they yielded 2.15 annual win shares, which is a 30% bump, which is more indicative of the number 10 overall pick. If you want to compare that and give that context, he said if you look at colleges, basically you look at annual win shares, expected annual win shares based on college draftees from different colleges. We're talking about Kentucky, we're talking about Kansas, we're talking about UCLA, Michigan State, UConn, Arizona, Michigan, the best college basketball programs in the country. The legacy bloodlines, they outperformed Kentucky, which had the best annual win shares for a college in the last 25 years, or since 1989. They were at one point. They were at one. I take it back. They were second. Kentucky was at 1.74, and then the father's son bloodlines, they were at 1.65. So the sons of the fathers are at 1.69, and Kentucky's at 1.74. Yeah. Which is pretty. If you look at the difference between annual win shares and expected win shares, so it's basically what he's saying is if you look at the 20, he said of the 20 legacy players selected between 1989 and 2005, the average career length was 9 seasons. All of the draftees averaged 6.7 years in the league. He said 10 players lasted 10 years. Names including Jalen Rose, whose father was Jimmy Walker, Mike Dunleavy Jr., whose father was Mike Sr., John and Brent Barry, whose father was Rick. He goes on, Luke Walton, that kind of thing. So his take would be Obviously, Patrick, I'll give you the floor. His take is that, it might be worth it on Bronny's merit alone if you're going to develop him the right way. He claims right now there are 34 second generation NBA players in the league, tied for the most in NBA history, set in the previous season. So every year they keep obviously setting the record for these nepo ballers, the sons of second generation NBA players, basically, because a lot of these scouts are now looking at this data and information, and they are being, I guess, selective on the guys that, of course, they pick. But they're saying the success rates and success stories are now more prevalent than they were when it comes to second generation bowlers.
Yeah,
that's his take.
I mean, I think that there is, if you find the right second generation ballers, then there are. One of the reasons why a lot of these guys do well too is because they physically have traits that, if you say, my dad is 6'9", and then, my mom is like 6'2", then I'm probably 6'6", 6'7", which is going to help me a lot in the NBA. The problem with Bronny is that he's like 6'3", 6'2". And so it's like, I know it's a silly thing, but in reality, if you're under 6'3" in the NBA, it's just really, really hard. It's really, really hard to make it and be a productive player, because you just have to be so much better than everybody else to be able to compete on that level. Do I think he could play in the NBA?